In a world gone mad, only rationality and common sense can save it. It's Andrew and Jerry Save the World with your hosts, Andrew Langer and Jerry Rogers. And now, here's Andrew and Jerry.
Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Andrew and Jerry Save the World, episode 55. DEI is destroying America. I am Andrew Langer.
Jerry Rogers.
And listen, we are recuperating from CPAC. Jerry, I have no CPAC cred. I've got a little cough, but beyond that, no CPAC cred this year.
Same with me. I'm in perfect shape.
Okay.
What is it?
I would say perfect shape.
Oh,
yes, tip-top shape. You're tip-top. You're feeling capital. Which, by the way, the other conversation you and I need to have is about next week, because next week, of course, is St. Patrick's Day next Friday.
Yes, of course.
So we've got to figure out when we're going to do the show next week. So we'll talk about that off the line. I have a mea culpa, or an acknowledgement to make at the top of the show. A tip of the hat to the brilliance of my podcast partner, Jerry Rogers.
Here.
As you may recall, see, Jerry, here's that summary from the last episode that you want. As you may recall, at the top of the last episode, we had a conversation about my paying the bill for a friend who had allegedly skipped out of a bar at CPAC without paying his bill, and Jerry immediately smelled a rat. Correct? Am I right, Jerry?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would have told the gentleman, bill in hand. What do you want me to do about it? It's your bill.
It's not my bill. It's this other person's bill.
I would have pulled a Joe Pesci on him.
Yeah. Yes.
Go back to your seat before I open up your head.
Go back and get your shine box. So I said, no, I think it's entirely possible. I still think it's entirely possible that it was this guy's bill. I did talk to this friend of mine over the weekend, and he does not recall not paying his bill. I don't think he recalls much from that evening. But
that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
If you don't recall,
it's very DC. I do not recall, Senator.
But that could evidence that could be the evidence that he didn't pay his bill.
That's exactly. Yes, that's exactly right. So in any case, he didn't remember, and so I wanted to make a tip of the hat to my podcast partner on at least listen. As Jerry would probably say, he was born at night, but he wasn't born last night.
But to me, the point of that story was partly the nerve of this person to come over to you, check in hand, when he was sitting with the alleged.
But I think it was just sitting with him by happenstance. I think it would be like, you go to a bar and you wind up sitting at a table with some random people, and then all of a sudden the random person.
But I wouldn't sit. You don't sit at a table with random people.
Well, okay, silly. That's a whole other pet peeve of mine. Because this gets into
I'm going to sit here. My name is Jerry.
My Friday night at CPAC, in which I was getting very tired of people, and I'm in the hotel bar at the Gaylord Hotel, and random people kept either trying to take our chairs or sit down on our table, and I'm thinking, who are these people? Why are they sitting? I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to talk to some random. Hold on, listen. Don't get me. Hold on. Let me say this, Jerry. I love the flyover states. I think we discount far too often in Washington, D.C. The importance of the so-called flyover states. But I don't want to sit down and talk with some random state senator from a flyover state that I don't know who this person is. I don't. I have no interest. Not an interest. I don't want to listen. I very rarely want to talk to state senators from my own state or my former state. Like, I can count on one hand the state senators from Maryland that I might actually want to sit down and have a conversation with.
Listen, it's one thing to be at the bar, the corner seat in the bar.
Yes.
People come and go, and in that circumstance, it's very common to say, "Hey, I'll buy him a drink. Put that drink on my tab." But if you're at a private table, which is why I think that your friend probably sat with these randos. They probably ordered a couple of drinks. Your friend is like, well, I'm at his table. He ordered the drinks.
I don't know. Well, see, the thing is about the Belvedere bar is that they have these communal tables. There are tables, and then there are other tables that seem to be a little more communal. It's this thing that they also have
It's amazing to me how we are just losing every sense of ourselves.
Well, propriety. There's propriety. Yes.
Don't even know what proper behavior is in a bar.
Yes.
This is just so silly.
This is why you and I need to do an episode, Jerry, where we go and bar hop on McLean Avenue in Yonkers, and I'm going to
be there. You mentioned St. Patrick's Day. I will be on Katona Avenue, the corner of Katona and McLean, at Rory Dolan's, at the Rambling House. We will be celebrating, hopefully on the 18th. We're going to see Shillelagh Law at the Rambling House.
Nice.
So yeah, we're going to be up in Woodlawn for St. Patrick's Day.
Our friends, actually they're not our friends, but a band I happen to admire greatly now, the Langers Ball, is releasing a song on St. Patrick's Day. Yes.
Oh, how exciting!
As we discovered,
is this one of the couples you go out on dates with?
No, the Langers Ball. It's an Irish band, Jerry. And as you informed me, I thought that Langer was just a pejorative in County Cork. I am now to understand that Langer has a much more generalized term in the Gaelic language, something that I apparently was unfamiliar with until I'm almost age 52. Want to do a special shout out to a couple of folks, everybody who attended the talk radio dinner last week, our guests who came on with us last week on our 2 days at CPAC. If you haven't watched or listened to those episodes, do so. But a special shout out to Mary Walter, who I know would have wanted to have been a part of this conversation, Jerry.
Yes.
She was a good arbiter, and I think we need to get her back. I think we need to have her on speed dial when you and I have a disagreement. In fact, when we have one of those episodes where you and I are disagreeing about something, yes, I think we ought to have a policy of pausing the show and getting Mary on the Zoom and getting her to arbitrate.
It's for our listening audience. Langer in Gaelic means fool.
Yes.
Idiot. Annoying or contemptible person.
Yes.
Usually a male.
Yes. And apparently also there's now a verb, getting langered, which essentially is like getting in fact, this friend of mine at the Belvedere bar last week,
yes,
he had certainly gotten langered while he was at he got langered, and then I got langered by having to pay.
Let me say this about the Belvedere bar. I don't like it.
Okay.
Because the waitresses, the bartenders don't understand how to be waitresses and bartenders.
Yes. Well, okay, but yes, I get that. I was going to make the suggestion that, do you think maybe they just find everybody who goes to CPAC entirely contemptible?
I don't know. I think the whole, if you notice this,
in contrast with that waitress at the fake Irish bar in National Harbor, the Irish Whisper.
Why is it a fake Irish bar?
It's a fake Irish bar.
Well, how do you know?
Because it is.
So says the guy who would spend St. Patrick's Day at Fido.
Well, okay. You know something? I'll say it. Fido, fake Irish bar, 100%, absolutely. Yes. The one thing I like about Fido being a fake Irish bar is that you could sit in the back in that fake Irish kitchen and imagine you were in a cottage in Ireland.
This is true.
That was great. But
well, yes, I like this place, and I tell you what made it.
Jerry, it's a fake Irish bar because it didn't open before 3:00.
Well, this is true, but what made it authentic for me is the fact that the bartender was so generous.
That's the thing. 100%. I think
that's
redeemed it for you. That's a very good point.
And also they were open until 2 a.m. by the way.
So Jerry and I on that Friday, did you go back?
I did not, but I made it a point to find out what time last call.
I know they closed earlier.
Last call 2 a.m.
So we went over. Jerry and I went over there on the Thursday of CPAC. We got done with everything we were doing. We were hungry. It was going to be several hours before our secret dinner with our friend, and we go. First we go, and it's a little bit before 3. We go and we go down to this Irish pub, and Jerry pulls on the door. It's 2:55. The bar's supposed to open at 3, and they weren't open. So Jerry got very salty and very angry. So we walk back up the street.
Well, that's after, by the way, we were in the other.
No, we went to the other one afterwards. We go to the Irish Whisper first. Then we walk up to the public house, and we go and we get seated immediately And we sit there and we sit there and we sit there. Nobody comes over, not to take a drink order, not to bring us water. And
Nothing.
And also Jerry found the place a little bit dirty.
It was filthy. It was filthy.
And so we leave the public house, walk back down to the Irish Whisper, and Rand,
and I'm glad we did.
Was having a secret meeting that we won't get into.
And I'm glad. And also that person again. Here's why the Irish Whisper to me now is a good Irish bar, because we sat down, and the patron to our left immediately bought us a round of drinks.
That's a good point.
And then the waitress,
but he understood his bar behavior. Yes.
And he's at a bar.
Yes.
And the waitress was very generous, right? Good company.
Yes, agreed. 100%.
It was good crack.
Her name was Dom.
Dom.
Yes.
Dom.
All right. Dom. She was great. So again, kudos to the Irish Whisper. And I apologize for calling it a fake Irish bar. So,
but now also our secret dinner that night was our secret dinner.
Yes, that was that night. I know it's all a blur.
With Alex O'Loughlin. Alex O'Loughlin. We had dinner with Alex O'Loughlin.
Okay. Why are we calling him? Oh, I see. Yes, that's right. Yes, because that's what he looks like.
The star from Hawaii Five-0.
Oh, is that who that is? Okay.
Yes.
See, this is okay. This is all a blur to me now.
You saw that
at the
picture.
same time you were sending that picture out, I was also getting pictures sent of the folks who were playing in that Joe Who Killed Robert Wan documentary that we watched last night.
I didn't watch that last night.
I watched that last night.
Now you're talking to yourself.
No, I know I'm talking to myself.
Listen, if you want to know who Andrew and I had dinner with, Google Alex O'Loughlin. That's who we had dinner with.
Yes. All right. So let's get to the meat of it, Jerry. Let's get into it because we are limited in time today. We're going to be doing more of this. Back to what we talked about and started the show, the podcast 54 episodes ago, where we're going to focus on one topic and spend a lot of time talking about the topic. We're going to get back into the habit of bringing on guests.
Yes.
A couple of weeks ago, we did a great episode on the 1619 Project. Got a lot of, in fact, I think that's been our most downloaded episode, at least on the audio side of it. And we want to peel these things back, and we want to talk today about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're going to probably touch on ESG, which is environmental and social governance, which is this idea of essentially taking DEI policies and applying them to economics and then applying them to corporate economic policies, which, by the way, Jerry and I had a conversation yesterday, maybe it was the day before, about this Chris Rock special. Like
Yes.
you, Jerry, I've watched the first half of it. I haven't watched the second half
And
of it.
thumbs
I
down.
liked it better than you did.
Okay.
I found certain elements
I give
of
it a thumbs
funny.
down.
I felt he uses the N-word a little much. In fact, we had a fake drinking game going on that every time he said the N-word, we were supposed to take a shot.
But here's my trouble with it, and that is because he said a couple or three things that conservatives like. All of a sudden,
Right.
you had all these reviews from conservative venues saying how great this stand-up show was. It wasn't great.
Yeah.
It was maybe mediocre. It was, in my mind, he had put on an affectation. It was forced. He was overly amped up. And I think it's, again, conservatives make this terrible mistake, thinking that just because someone says something sometime that's somewhat like what we believe, we all of a sudden give a homage to the celebrity.
I'm
tired of celebrities.
Well, that's right. But the point is, when some celebrity tells a little bit of the truth, like opens up the door,
Yeah, a little bit.
creaks it open, and gives you a little glimpse of the truth. Jerry doesn't like that.
No.
I'm
Well,
sorry.
I don't like
Jerry, Jerry
how
likes,
we
I'm sorry,
automatically start praising.
No. Yeah, that's the point. Don't want to praise somebody for
Bill
cracking open the
Bill
door.
Maher is not a conservative. He doesn't support our principles. Joe Rogan is not a conservative. Doesn't support our principles.
Right.
Chris Rock, not a conservative. Doesn't
Elon
support
Musk.
Elon Musk. Dave Chappelle. I mean, and on and on. All of a sudden, the guy that you like, Jon Stewart. I remember Jon Stewart when he was on Comedy Central. Conservative friends of mine, maybe you weren't included in this, but conservative friends of mine were like, "This guy's a truth teller." Now he is the biggest woke talky out there. But more recently, he gave an interview where he was shocked at cancel culture. And I'm thinking to myself, he's now shocked at cancel culture,
Right,
which he helped create.
right. Yes, I mean it's an issue. Listen, we can talk about this issue of the left and leftists who will occasionally stumble. All right, the concept is that Jerry's, I think, talking about here is that a blind squirrel can find a nut, every once in a while. That a stopped clock is right twice a day. And because a stop clock is right twice a day, that doesn't mean.
But this isn't
working
right.
for one of us.
This isn't a criticism of those celebrities. This is a criticism of conservatives who feel the need for validation.
I don't even think it's a criticism so much, Jerry, as what it is. It's a warning to sort of have your eyes open, right? First of all, we should be consistent in the fact that we shouldn't be worshiping celebrity.
Right.
There's that part, because you will always be disappointed in the end. There's no two ways about it.
And again, just as a side note, this is part of the Trump phenomenon in that he was a celebrity.
Right.
And a lot of conservative working class Americans thought, hey, here's one on our side. And I think that really did feed into to Trump.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because I would also say that there's the flip side to Jon Stewart. In a way, sort of in the journey, right, is that I think that Jon Stewart was doing one thing on the Daily Show, and then when he got his Apple show, he didn't feel like he needed to be as much of a truth teller, and this is not what Apple wanted him to do. I think the opposite being, hold on, that Donald Trump he said a couple of things, and then he sort of realized that if he fully embraced this persona of the populist conservative, that he could get elected president, and he governed as a conservative. But like everything else, inevitably, he disappointed, right? And that's the point in all of this is when you go down the road of hero worship, you're going to be disappointed. And I've said this. I want to make sure everybody knows that I'm trying to be consistent here. I believe that when people tell the truth, you should underscore that they're telling the truth, but you can't be sycophantic about it.
Sure.
So when Chris Rock says that Subaru is full of crap because they give $250 to woke causes, and he would just rather have the $250 back.
Right.
Or when he's astounded that people are paying $100 for Lululemon anti-racist pants, and he'd rather have most of the people in his audience, he said, in fact, all of them in his audience would rather have $20 racist pants.
Right.
I think there's something to be said for that kind of that kind of truth telling. But that being said, that doesn't mean that I'm going to label Chris Rock as a conservative or worship the ground that he walks on.
This leads right into the topic of the show, which is how DEI is the most dangerous philosophy in America today, and a lot of what we're talking about here is because of or a response to DEI. When you erase meritocracy, when you have the government deciding winners and losers, right? You run into this anti-American, un-American, we must transform America philosophy. This is why, again, I've said this before on our show, that we are progressively advancing backwards to a pre-Western culture where if you're an elitist, if you're privileged and rich, you're reverting back to dynasty and nepotism. But if you're poor or you're beneath the elite class, well, you're reverting back to tribalism. This is dangerous.
It's funny. Mel Brooks has his New History of the World Part 2 out. Watched a little bit of it. It's going to be disappointing, but he did this character back in the 1960s called the 2,000-Year-Old Man. Jerry, do you remember? Of course,
this? Yeah.
And then he and Carl Reiner did a reboot of it in the year 2000. The 2,000-Year-Old Man in the year 2000, and I happened to see him perform. And one of the things he, as the 2,000-Year-Old Man, said, because Carl Reiner asked him about anthems and songs and nations. And the 2,000-Year-Old Man says, well, we all had caves. We were all in caves then, Jerry. And each cave was its own cave. And our song was something like, you can all go to hell, except Cave 75. and that's essentially what we're talking about here. And
Sure.
The issue of tribalism, you all go to hell unless you're part of my tribe. But here's the problem.
Sure.
And this is something that I talked about. That group of students from my high school came to CPAC. I was talking to them a little bit about this. When you erase our history, right? And remember, this is part of the dangers of DEI and CRT is that they say they're not erasing history. They're telling, they're fleshing out history, which is not true. But when you use history as a cudgel to divide people and you dismiss the basic principles upon which our nation was built and upon which our society functions. Jerry talks about meritocracy. When you tell the issues of equality under the law, free speech, freedom of expression, freedom of religion. When you tear at those things, and we have no common ground from which to operate on, it is impossible. It becomes impossible for people to come together to solve problems. Now we could. Whether or not they're phantom problems, as we deal with a lot today, or whether or not they're real problems, especially the real problems, if you can't come together to solve them, then society just continues to careen on and collapse. Sorry, go ahead, Jerry.
No, and what's important here is to remember that it's not just American history.
Yep.
Why we should understand Western history, the important dates, the important battles, the important stories, why we should know Plato and Socrates and others is because we don't want to repeat the tragedies and the mistakes of the past.
What's past is prologue.
Yeah, right. And what's happening in America today, we have two generations of young people who are arrogant in their hubris. Or they're arrogant in their ignorance. Their hubris is their ignorance, and they don't know what they don't know, and
right.
they make these statements. And again, I repeat myself because it's such a simple example, and that is you have a whole and we're talking about DEI, right?
Diversity,
equity, inclusion, which of course is part of this whole queer theory. Critical race theory and legal theory.
Yes.
And now you have this legal theory because of the need to transform America, because of ignorance of history, because we're reverting back to tribalism, where you have young people, students, law students, who will tell you that it's inherently undemocratic and unfair that a big state like California has 2 senators,
right?
While a small state with little population like Wyoming also has 2 senators. And what they misunderstand is that in history, throughout history, there have been democracies that all have, frankly, devolved into tyranny. And our founding fathers understood history.
Yes.
Which is why they put these protections in place.
And that's why there is an attack, as you said, not just on American history, but on the basic tenets of Western civilization that preceded it, right? If you attack, it's not enough to attack Thomas Jefferson and James Madison,
right?
But you have to go back and you have to attack
John Locke and
then going even further back, Plato and Aristotle and Socrates, etc. You go much further back to do those things.
And what's interesting, Andrew, is
hold on. Let me just say something real quick, because I want to make sure people are understanding this. Jerry and I have no problem with diversity if it's true diversity, right? Which should be diversity of thought, diversity of experience, etc. Equity,
the depth and the width of our differences.
So there is a difference between equity and equality, which we are going to get into in a moment. There's a problem with that. In fact, and then the idea of inclusion, obviously we think people ought to be included, but again, it's this issue of forcing inclusivity and sort of going down this road of denying reality. This is the problem. Let's talk about this for a second, the issue of equity. So we have in America, it's right up there in the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. They are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. And among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
And you understand, by the way, what the founders meant by the pursuit of happiness. What they meant literally was the pursuit of wisdom and truth. That's what they meant by that by that phrase.
Well, on the pursuit of property. I mean, the original draft was the pursuit
Right,
of property.
but
They wanted it was
the idea
essentially to pursue
I know,
your own devices. Yes.
but the left misunderstands happiness as libertine, and that's not what the founders believed.
Well,
they
yes.
believed in ordered liberty, and they believed that happiness, the good life,
Yes.
literally the good life, is a result of the quest for truth.
Well, I don't want to get away from this. The point is that in this difference between equity and equality, right? Our society and the very concept of meritocracy, right? Rising on your own merits and abilities and achievements is the idea of you set a level playing field in terms of opportunity, the ability to go and pursue these things, to pursue your happiness, whatever that might be.
The irony is that the left, in its pursuit of equity, which is equality of outcome,
right?
Yes, what they've done is they've actually gamed the system. Remember, and this is just truth, we're not all equal,
right?
Some are taller, some are shorter, some have the gene for longevity, will live to be 90 and healthy, others will have cancer. We have differences in IQ, a difference in athletic ability. We are not equal.
Yes.
But what made the Western culture and American culture in particular, what it allowed was meritocracy allows for you to overcome those differences.
Right.
And this is the insanity or the irrationality of what the left is trying to do. Here's a practical example. I'm sorry.
Yeah, please. That's fine.
The undoing of the SAT.
Yeah.
The SAT in the 1960s, if you were a poor kid going to public school in the Bronx and you got straight A's, but you had to compete for a Harvard position at Harvard against a dynasty kid, a son of a son of a son of a Harvard grad who went to Regis or one of the other elite schools in Manhattan, and you had similar grades. The admissions office at Harvard could say, yes, you have very similar grades, same GPAs, but this kid went to Regis or wherever. He went to this elite school, and you went to a public school in the Bronx. But then that kid from the Bronx could say, but my SAT score is higher.
Right.
And again, undoing the SAT, this is what diversity, equity, and inclusion does. It erases from Ivy League schools and other institutions, it erases the working class.
Well, it can.
It does. It has.
My point is this. When you have these equality of outcomes, because Jerry, I want to make sure we don't gloss over what you said about gaming the system.
Right.
What Jerry's talking about is when you take away what are standardized measurements, objective measurements of someone's abilities, like an SAT, a standardized test, and you start to inject all of these intangibles in it as a way of generating a predetermined outcome. What that means is that somebody in a back room somewhere can then game the system.
Sure.
Right. It's a way of, and again, I'm going to use another movie reference here, Jerry. You ever see the movie Red Belt? David Mamet?
No.
Great movie. It is about martial arts competitions, and the main character has come up with a new way of doing a martial arts competition where someone can be given a handicap at the start of the competition. As a way of proving their achievement. It's a way of making it more interesting. Well, the gamblers in the world realize that what this guy has done is created a way to pregame the outcome of a fight so that they can pick the winners and losers in the back room, and through sleight of hand do it that way, so they can pick whoever's going to get the handicap, and that way they can make a huge amount of money in the back room. That's the problem here, is that once things become, and this is why throughout our public policy process, our laws have made it clear that things have to be done in an objective way. They can't be done just at the whims of the mobocracy, but our policies have to be made in a way that is not arbitrary, capricious, and abuse of discretion, or otherwise not in accordance with the law. Right. And once you sort of take out that objectivity in all of these things, then you get somebody who can game the system and change things, and whether it's to the benefits of the elite, or the benefits of a particular political party, or the benefits of a particular corporation, etc.
And very real example just now, Look, there's a line from, oh my goodness, for when the bell tolls.
For whom the bell tolls.
There's a line in it. This is Hemingway, right?
Yes.
There's a line in the Hemingway novel. How did you become bankrupt? And the response is gradually and then suddenly. I forget it's something I forget. Again, I'm saying I should have looked this up ahead of time. I apologize.
That's all right. Don't worry.
There's a line in literature. How did you become bankrupt?
Yes.
Gradually, then suddenly.
Yes.
So gradually, we've been moving in this direction of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
I'm so glad you opened it up that way. Go ahead, because I got a story to tell.
But however, it has happened suddenly since George Floyd in the riots of 2000. And again, here are some real examples. Look at Stanford, look at Harvard, and it has changed. So what's happening now is they've done away with standardized testing and other admission standards. It's now amorphous. It's equity, right? It's diversity. Diversity is now the standard. And if you look at what's happening is it's gone backwards. There was a time, right, where you could get a gentleman's C in the Ivy League. You were the son of a son of a son, right? You were you got your position in Harvard because your father graduated or something like that.
Right.
And however, in the 50s and 60s, this began to change. And they're working class Americans, ethnic Catholics, and minority groups and new immigrants could get into these Ivy League schools because of the SAT scores, because of meritocracy. Now it has changed gradually now suddenly. And you look at the incoming classes at Stanford, at Harvard, at Yale, and what has happened is these schools have gone to racial gerrymandering, and so diversity is the standard. And what you have is in all these schools now, you have about 25% of the student body, incoming freshmen, are white.
Yeah.
And about 60% of that 25% is female.
Yes.
And so what's happening is they're going back, however, and if you're white, you're getting in, or you have an advantage gaming the system if your father or grandfather graduated. And so what's happening is the working class immigrant, the working class, those who could get into a Harvard or a Stanford because of meritocracy, they've literally, in the last 3 or 4 years, Andrew, disappeared from the campus.
I will tell you, some of this is also by design, Jerry, because what they want to do is they want to get these kids into the treadmill of, they want to get them into state schools, public universities, large schools. Then they want to get them on either free education through paid for by the federal government, or they want to get them on the treadmill of the federally backed student loan.
I've said this before, but I think the number is somewhere. It's just short of 1 million students lacking in universities this year versus the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And part of it, we haven't mentioned this yet, but part of this DEI is at the university level now. Professors are forced to take a DEI pledge.
Yeah.
They have to, this is true in medical schools now.
Yeah.
You have to take a DEI pledge. And so this is what I mean by gradually to suddenly. Suddenly, we have whole areas of our economy where folks are being locked out, either because they are the wrong ethnicity, the wrong race, or because they refuse to say the oath.
Also, more to the point, the educational process, the learning process gets shortchanged overall. I want to take a step back for a second, Jerry, because I want to talk about this gradual issue and something that I came upon a couple of weeks ago, or last week, really. So the week before CPAC, as Jerry and I were talking about these issues, and we're talking about the 1619 project, I told the story about my switching over from public schools, the Greenberg Central 7 schools in New York, to private school in 10th grade. And I don't remember how detailed I got into the story. But the reason why I did this is because my public school system in New York was having these discussions about transitioning away from meritocracy and what's called a homogeneous grouping, the idea of having honors classes, and lumping everybody together. I told the story. So a week later, weirdly enough, and I know I told you this, Jerry, but I'm going to tell the story on the air. I had a buddy who was in public schools who posted screenshots, pictures that he had taken. He'd found a bunch of newspapers from the public high school that I'd gone to, and took pictures of them and posted them. And one of the stories was, and this is the would have been my junior year of high school, so a full year after I had left. And it was a story about the school system being deeply troubled by the number of students in the school district who were not going to the public schools. Almost 1,000 students in the school district had left the public schools and had gone to private schools. And both members of the school board and members of the teachers union and members of the administration, they were all deeply alarmed by this. And they couldn't figure out why, Jerry. They couldn't figure out why these students had left. And they were going to have a series of listening sessions. Now, I don't know what ever happened with those listening sessions. I certainly don't think, I know I didn't participate in them to talk about my story. I don't believe my parents were a part of this, though I think my story was well known because, as I said, my mom was on the school board. But the point is, this was 35 years ago. This was May of 1988, Jerry, that this story came out. The school district did nothing to change their trajectory. It is now one of the worst school districts in Westchester. It's probably a little bit above other awful school districts in the state of New York. But certainly, when you talk about these things, this is what happens when you don't take care of a problem years ago, and it festers and it gets worse over time to the point now. And ironically, anyway.
Yeah, but again, to use your phrase, more to the point.
Yes.
This isn't a problem that's festering. This is done on purpose. This is a philosophy. This is a mechanism by which they're trying to transform our culture. And
yes.
by the way, Andrew, how did you go bankrupt? 2 ways: gradually, then suddenly. That's of course from The Sun Also Rises.
But Sun Also Rises. So this is, but this is just it, right? This is what I'm saying, is that it was gradual for the school system, and then it shoots up.
But what I'm saying is that in recent history, it was the George Floyd, the overreaction to George Floyd.
Call that an inflection point.
Right. And going back to your point about gradually. So Barack Obama, again, a theme of our programs, the left is brilliant. Barack Obama understood in the 2000s that he had to, just like the Marxist, you had to separate class from Marxism. And so they decided on ethnicity and race, and what they settled on was diversity. And this is the new catchphrase or moniker for the new Marxist. And here's an example, going back to Chris Rock. We started about the Chris Rock special.
Yep.
So he goes after Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex.
I did hear,
and makes fun of her, claiming to be a victim of racism. She's a victim. Now, never mind her wealth, her fame, her celebrity. But this is diversity in action. This is DEI in action, where the Duchess of Sussex, right, can claim victimhood by virtue of diversity because of her race. And again, I've used this already, but it works. This is why the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle, can go on the Oprah Winfrey show, the multi-billionaire media powerhouse Oprah Winfrey, and they both can commiserate about their victim status.
Right.
This is tribalism. This is equity. This is diversity. This is where they're pushing us, and which is why, again, gaming the system. It's why if Oprah Winfrey were to have children, her children would get, even though she's wealthy and she is privileged and she's an elite class, her children would get first dibs at Harvard, where your children or my children wouldn't even be considered.
Listen, all I know is I'll say this anyway. Let me take.
You get my point, though, right?
I get your point. I guess part of what I'm saying is, Jerry, that I think very few people recognized beyond the barest glimpses of where the seeds of DEI were going to go back in the mid-1980s. right? And I've talked about this in terms of the history. And
I don't know. I think the left knew exactly where it was going, and they've been patient.
I think no, I'm not so sure. Again, maybe this is me sort of using Hanlon's.
Well, I mean, critical race theory started in academia in the 1960s.
Well, right, but Jerry, but it wasn't something that was mainstream or really talked about by a lot of people. I think you had folks who were talking about. You had some folks, right? We had a situation in America. We were on the verge of defeating racism, as we had defined racism at the time being bigotry. In the 1970s, we really were on the precipice. And we saw the seeds of something coming to play into the 80s, right? The 1970s and into the 1980s. And then all at once we started talking about diversity. We started talking about diversity. And we weren't talking about diversity as a way of completely reshaping our economic system. We were talking about it as a way of sort of celebrating. And more to the point, it was there are some folks who I think knew what it was going to do, which
is that's my point.
Us.
Yes,
that's my point here. Like I recognized very early on that when you, again, I don't consider myself a genius. I just saw what was happening around me, where if you celebrate the what makes people different as opposed to what makes people the same, you highlight those differences, you're going to keep people as different. But I don't think anybody suspected, I'm sorry, with very few exceptions, it certainly wasn't mainstream, that in the 35 years between 1988 and 2003, all of a sudden we were going to be dividing people once again by racial affinity groups, that we were going to have spaces on college campuses where whites and blacks are being, and Latinos are being all separated, and they have their own individual spaces. I don't think anybody, very few would have predicted that. And I think if you'd said that in 1988, people would have said you were a crazy kook. And I certainly don't think.
I think you're right. I think the average person would have said you're crazy. But I think that if you sat with professors and other elites in politics, they would have said, this is where we're going.
Okay, but let me ask you this, right? Because one of the people I blame for this is Al Sharpton, right? I don't think Al Sharpton had it in his head that Al Sharpton was going to push this.
I don't think Al. Al Sharpton is not. He's not an intellectual prime mover.
No, he's not an intellectual, but he was an
activist
pushing these things. I mean, that was, he was at the forefront of pushing these issues. I think he was doing it right. He was doing it out of his own. He was the grifter. What's ironic, of course,
he was the shakedown artist.
What's ironic, Jerry, is that if Al Sharpton had been a Republican or a conservative engaging the grift, he would have destroyed the movement. Somehow the perniciousness of this destructive philosophy has continued.
I get your point. I think Sharpton was a useful tool to those who are really behind, again, queer theory, gender theory, critical race theory.
I don't doubt that in some Communist International, that in some meeting somewhere, that the Marxist theorists of the 1960s, not that this happened in the 1960s, but somewhere during the 1980s, while the Soviet Union was still around, the Marxist academic theorists who started to push CRT in the 1960s got together with activists in the 1980s under the auspices of the Soviet Union and said, something, we can completely destroy and reshape American culture.
See, I agree with you. Here's the thing. I think there's always been a cadre of those who have been pushing for this,
right?
And for the most part, they were behind the academia. They were in they were in places that didn't really trickle down to the culture. But what happened, and our old mentor Fred Smith would have made this point. What happened was we became so wealthy, we became so intellectual, so lettered. That we have a whole generation. We had a whole generation come to adulthood who had never produced anything, who had never done anything, and so these ideas of equity, of power shifting, of transforming the America, really was and has been the elites in this country, which is why you and I talk about very often. It's no longer left versus right. It really is the elites versus the working class.
And the other,
so that's how it jumped.
And they know, and someone recognized, right, that guilt is an incredibly powerful tool. Now we know
Sure,
Jerry and I will agree. Jerry, I know Jerry and I.
but so
will agree with
is
this.
pride and hubris, and I think a lot of this has to do with hubris. Again,
There's
in my
the
mind.
hubris. Well, I agree with you. There's the hubris, Jerry, but I'm talking about how
I
this
know
is
better
able
than
to
you.
sort of
I should run your life for
well,
you.
there's that aspect of it, certainly. But what I'm saying is, and this talks about the inflection point in the last few years, the gradual and then the accelerated, right?
Right.
Because you and I both know that among the insults that you can call somebody in the United States, calling someone a racist, politician, public figure, person, and is about one of the worst things you can call somebody. Then if you change the definition of racism to sort of meet everyday behavior, so anybody can become a racist, you can, and you now say that it's endemic. If you don't believe in diversity, equity, and education and inclusion, it means you're a racist. If you don't accept that someone born with a penis is really a girl, well then you're a bigot. You're transphobic. But by the way, I'm sorry, Jerry. I want to digress for 1 second here. Love the fact that Jill Biden celebrated International Women's Day yesterday by giving an award to a man, which gets in the whole misogyny of the trans thing. But anyway, go ahead.
But again, it shows that the diversity, equity, inclusion philosophy, religion, is having this immediate impact on our culture, our politics, our economy, and again. It is. I said to my girls yesterday. I have 4 daughters. I said to my daughters, I said it is now ridiculous to even have an International Women's Day,
right,
when we cannot define what a woman is.
Right.
And this is not. This is part of the whole gender theory, part of the whole DEI mantra. Look, it's not rational. It's not science. It's not biology. It is not truth. It is not history. And what I think is for us to, I say this all the time at the end of the program, right? Find the truth, plant your feet, stand firm.
Janice loves that, by the way.
There are certain areas of the public discourse now that we have to think about. I'll use a movie reference. Think about 300.
Yeah.
And think about when they when the Persians clash with the 300 Spartans, and then the king says, hold, and they stop.
Yeah.
They stand firm.
Right.
There are battles now that we just have to stand firm. One of which, and even if this is the takeaway from the show, I will never refer to a man as a woman, or I will never use the pronoun he for a she and she for a he. I will never do it. Yeah. I won't do it. It's not right. And again, because we know this from history, you let them usurp the language, well, then it's over.
Right. It really becomes what Orwell predicted. I want to step back again for a moment, Jerry, and because in talking about this and in talking about the gradual and then rocketing forward in the George Floyd point, that has its analogs throughout history, as there are movements that sort of start slowly and then build, and then all of a sudden there is an explosion. I think most especially of the various Marxist revolutions at the beginning of the 20th century, right? And the attempts therein, right? Marxism had existed for decades before this had happened in theory,
right? Yeah.
And then it happened to take, a World War I and economic collapse and problems happening in Russia for it to take hold in pre-Soviet Russia.
And the thing is here is that it's the two metaphors I think of. One is the virus. How a virus jumps and all of a sudden becomes pandemic. I think the DEI movement is pandemic. The second metaphor is the frog being slowly boiled.
Yes,
I think there are a lot of people who they caved to the pronoun wars because they just wanted to be kind. And I think too often though we mistake love for kindness or kindness for love. And I think the true loving thing to do is to speak the truth, because again,
listen, I think I may have mentioned this. We've got family friends and they are very progressive, and their younger child has declared themselves to be a different gender than the one they were born with. And it's one of those things. It's funny. David Mamet, the playwright, said this: you get mugged by reality.
Right.
And this was a wake up call. Now they're not all of a sudden going to turn around and go and vote for Donald Trump or Pat Robertson or whomever.
Is Pat still alive? Yeah,
I don't know if Pat's still alive, but
no,
anyway,
he is.
But the point is, they're all of a sudden not going to become rock rib conservative Republicans or just conservatives generally, but nevertheless, it's a wake up call to sort of say, something, I
Sure.
don't understand this. My child who may have been quirky and had quirks before, but now to sort of go down this road
and we've talked about this. It's now part of the indoctrination, not only in corporate America. Look, I've had to for a corporation I'm affiliated with. I've had to go through these ridiculous training seminars where you're using wrong pronouns. I won't do it. But also, I said this to you recently. I'm going to talk about this on the WBAL, my WBAL Sunday show.
You're still doing that, Jerry?
Week. Yeah, the Sunday sermon with Jerry. If it's Sunday, it's Jerry. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this week this idea that in Maryland public schools, but it's public schools across the country, where they're now teaching kindergartners through fifth graders, teaching them LGBTQ transgendered lessons. And again, I asked one of these parents, friendly with my wife, was outraged and so disturbed by this. And I asked for, trust but verify. So I asked for the letter and I received it. And here's the thing: the public school systems around the country are indoctrinating children into sexual perversion. There's no other term to use. They are teaching children as young as 5 about sexual issues and sexuality that is inappropriate. And I can give you an example. So I talked to another mother whose daughter is in first grade and came home really upset because some of her school friends were talking about a third grader. And the third grader, they can't tell if the third grader is a boy or a girl.
Right.
So this mother did some checking because, kids can be cruel and this sort of thing. We don't want to get to a bullying incident. It's kind of strange too. It's an older student, third grader. It turns out this child is called transgendered and allowed to use the wrong gender.
Yeah.
And in third grade. So I'm thinking to myself, there was a time in American history when these parents would have been deemed unfit.
Right.
This is child abuse.
Right.
Instead of checking and protecting this child, the school system is participating in the child abuse. And what's worse is all the surrounding kids, as young as first graders, are so confused as to what's happening.
Right. And hold on, because there's so many ways to go here, Jerry, because I also wanted to talk about the substance of the letter. One of the things Jerry doesn't mention is that this letter being sent home to parents makes it really clear that they're not going to tell you which days they're going to be teaching this stuff on. So you can't even have the choice of pulling your schools, keeping your kids home for that.
You're not allowed to opt out of it. Right. And it's throughout the curriculum. So it's not just in health class because, kindergartners don't have health class. They have gym. So it's going to be part of the curriculum on various days throughout the day and throughout the curriculum. And again, how do you protect your child from this?
Right. More to the point, it's not even a question of how to protect your child. Right. I mean, we talk about protection and non-protection. The point is you have a worldview, right? And you have a worldview in terms of your religious background or your moral background, or let's even say, you have just how you view reality, right? You have a viewpoint, a worldview that is grounded in objective reality. Kids are not stupid. I mean, some of them are, but by and large, right, Jerry, kids are not stupid. And we went through this with the whole masking thing, right? We knew at the start of the pandemic, you keep kids' faces covered, especially little kids, and the teachers' faces covered, you're going to have problems down the road. But you can't talk with children being able to develop, right? Whether it's speech impediments or learning disabilities or whatever, you're going to have that problem.
Right.
We know that kids are truth tellers, right? Kids see something, they don't have a filter. They haven't been taught how to filter things. So a kid's going to see another kid who is a different gender. They're going to say something. And there's no,
but also think about
Hold up, Jerry. Let me just finish my point. They're going to get punished for it, for saying, "Oh my God, there's something really strange going on here."
Yes.
Hold on. Let me give you. Hold on.
But you're not even scratching what the real terror is, which is, again, brain development. Again, you mentioned masking. Yes. We now know from brain science that children, all children,
yes,
who were forced to mask, their brains develop differently than if they hadn't been masked.
Forced to mask, forced to be isolated from their playmates, who are still not allowed to sort of sit and socialize with one another. I mean, we are really, I mean, there's a real danger here in terms of the generation that follows up my kids.
But then this is the point about this. This transgendered LGBTQ agenda in the public schools is religion. It's not science. It's not science.
Yes,
it's religion.
Yes.
And again, I interrupted you, but
it's all right.
But at the end of the day, look, we know from science. I'm going to say this, and it's going to be provocative, but being homosexual or being differently sexual, right? Because I believe the science tells us that sexuality is fluid. You know, there are studies where heterosexual men go into prison, and because as human beings we crave intimacy and relationship, we'll engage in homosexual relationships in jail, in prison, and then once they exit prison, go back to their heterosexual lifestyle. Well, again, it's just but the point is that you know, we're remarkable human beings, and how we're made. We are remarkably made. I just discovered or rediscovered something yesterday. When you exercise, your muscles contract, and they secrete a certain hormone that doctors call the hope molecule. And what it does is the hormone seeps into your bloodstream, is emitted into your bloodstream, goes to your brain, and it's a natural defense against anxiety and depression and stress. My point is, we're made wonderfully, and what happens is when we interfere with that, we get these certain outcomes. Andrew,
you're a big fat load. You need to exercise more.
Folks who engage fully in the homosexual lifestyle have had trauma in their lives, have had broken relationships in their lives, and how it and what had all I'll say this, all homosexuals have had some kind of arrested development in their psychosexual development from in the age of 4th grade to 10th grade. And I'll give you an example of this. All boys want to be accepted by other boys.
Yeah,
I have an 8-year-old. His biggest quest in life is to be with his buddies.
Yeah,
that's what he wants to do. Now, let's say that he was unaccepted by his buddies. Let's say that he was bullied. Let's say that he was someone who had a quality. He was more artistic than athletic. Let's say he was not accepted by the boys. Well, the desire to be accepted becomes even greater. And then you begin to mistake psychosexually. You begin to mistake that the wanting to be accepted to being attracted to.
Right.
My point is that there's a whole science about sexuality, but what we're doing instead is we're saying that transsexual and homosexual and all these things should be celebrated and accepted and taught in public schools, but no one's teaching that heterosexuality, that marriage between one woman and one man for life. No one's teaching those things.
Right. All right, that's bad because it's traditional, and it's. Let me take this moment to tee this up. I don't know if I urge folks to do this. We watched last night this documentary on Peacock. You have to have Peacock Premium, called "Who Killed Robert Wan." And Jerry and I have talked a little bit about this.
I watched it. Who is Robert Wan?
Let me explain this. So in 2006, there was a heinous murder in Washington, D.C.
Oh, I'm sorry.
An Asian lawyer for Radio Free Asia went to the home of a friend of his from college and got to the home at 10 o'clock, and sometime between 10 and 11, 10 and midnight, or 10:30 and midnight, was murdered in the home. And to this date, nobody has ever been convicted of the crime. Now, as it happens, I knew Robert. Robert was a few years behind me in college, and I also know one of the persons who was suspected of the murder. somebody I went to William and Mary with, who was frankly my nemesis in college. His name was Joe Price, which is a whole. I know Jerry's chuckling because I had a nemesis in college.
Yeah, it's so funny.
It's a whole thing, but you know, I could get into it at some other point. The point is,
nemesis.
Here was something really interesting though that I'd forgotten about in all of this. So one of the DC, one of the things that comes out of this is the DC police completely screwed this thing up. There are a lot of reasons why they screwed up this investigation and why nobody was ever charged or convicted. 2 weeks or 3 weeks after, maybe it was a month after the murder happens, and Joe is gay. Joe was living with his husband, a guy named Victor Saborski, and a third man lived in the house by the name of Dylan Ward.
They were a trouble.
Well, they were kind of a thruple.
Okay. Now,
Joe, hold on. Let me explain though.
No, just
I don't want to go. I don't want to go down too.
No, but I want you to tell the story. But I just want to make clear that in a free, again, in a free world, people should engage in sexuality that they want. I'm not saying they shouldn't do that. What I am saying though is that a lot of this is religious, or it is philosophical. It is choices that we make. Anyway,
listen, my point in bringing this up, because it gets to your issue of trauma. The point is, anyway, that's not quite the point yet. Joe was involved. He was married to Victor, but he was also involved in a relationship with Dylan. Dylan was not involved with Victor. So it was a weird triangle relationship.
I got to diagram this.
Okay. I know they actually made a diagram of it in the show last time.
Okay.
A month after the murder happens, somebody breaks into the house. And it turns out that it's Joe's brother, Michael Price. Michael Price, who is also gay. And that was really weird to me, because you very rarely have a circumstance in which, if you have siblings, you know, multiple children of the same parents, that both kids are gay. And I think it gets to your point that there's some kind of trauma. If you now understand what Joe's sexuality was, the stuff that he was allegedly into, there's very clear that there is there are issues that are at work.
Right. And my point is
that
our sexuality, yes, a lot of it has to do with nature, but I believe most of it has to do with environment and nurture. And so my point about the schools is that we are literally teaching young people to be pansexual. And so therefore it is not a surprise that for instance, in Maryland, here in Maryland, Montgomery County school system has seen a 600% increase in gender confusion.
The gradual, and then it rockets up, right? Because what happens is that things get refined and then they get accelerated.
So in the world of DEI, in the world of queer theory, critical race theory, legal theory, and all the rest of the critical theories, it has to do with forcing a religion down the throat of those who are the masses.
Well, it's the religion, and it's the punishment of those who deviate from the orthodoxy.
Right.
You get into the fact that you have a group of kids, and kids want to please adults. They want to please their teachers, so they parrot these things. And some of them are craving attention, right? You're talking about Andrew, attention and acceptance.
Let's look forward, and we've talked about this, but let's say it again, and we can point back to today's date. We're arguing in New York City and Chicago and Baltimore City that juveniles under the age of 25 should not be charged with felony crimes, because their brain is still developing. Right. This kind of, again, let's give someone a little bit of knowledge and they become very, very dangerous. The brain develops at different rates, and different parts of the brain develop differently. So this idea that you can't be charged with a crime if you're 25 because the brain's developed it's just nonsense. But regardless, so we're saying, the left is saying, the DEI crowd is saying, we can't charge a 24-year-old with a felony murder because his brain isn't developed, but we allow a third grader to say the boy is a girl, the girl is the boy. Now, where do you think this is leading to? It's leading to getting rid of all age of consent laws. We are sexualizing our children at earlier and earlier ages.
Well, and it's also a situation in which, and again, now I am going to raise the specter of Bill Maher, because Bill Maher did say it best, Jerry, in this regard. And again, I'm not calling Bill Maher a hero.
I know.
But the point is, he said cleverly, when I was age 10 or I was age 8, I wanted to be a pirate. And if my parents had let me continue down that road, I have a peg leg and a patch on my eye now. That's the point. But sometimes turn to your kids and you say, no, you can't be at all times. Listen, you want to, I'm going to say this word. And I mean, literally, if you're a little boy and you're at home and you want to dress up with a pink dress and have a little, have a hat. And
that's normal, by the way. There's nothing wrong with that. Yes. For boys wanting to dress again, and this is the problem.
I don't know, man. Here. I didn't want to dress up as a girl when I was.
However, it's normal for young boys to be curious about being girls, but the problem is now we have adults weighing on the children our philosophies and our wokeness on them. We're not letting kids to be kids any longer. We are robbing them of their innocence.
That's the thing, is that we're robbing them.
But let me make this point before I forget.
We're robbing them of their innocence. I mean, we're robbing them of
under the auspices of diversity, of equity and inclusion. But let me say this again, how we're progressively advancing backwards, and how we're entering into a pre-Western, a kind of tribal or dynasty kind of a way of an outlook on the world. Remember the Roman Empire.
I'm rewatching Rome right now, Jerry.
All right, the Roman Empire. If you were of the elite class and you visited a Roman citizen, you were offered a man, a woman, a boy, or a girl.
Yeah.
So my point is that people will say,
until Tsarist Russia that you were offered a horse. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But people will say, Jerry, this is insane. No way this is going to happen. It's already happened. We know of Roman elite and Roman Caesars who had children delivered to them to be used as in myriad abusive ways. This has happened before. Why are we going? We're again, if you don't know history, you're going to repeat it. And this is the problem here. We are progressively advancing backwards to tribalism and to a kind of a pre-Judeo-Christian worldview. Let me say this last thing.
Yeah, and then
people tell me all the time that, well, Jerry, the Bible or your kind of Judeo-Christian ethic was written 2,000 years ago when homophobia was the norm. No. First of all, the word homosexual didn't come into the English language until the 1860s, until science wanted to give a term to same-sex attraction. It wasn't until the 1860s that the word homosexual even entered into the
No, Jerry, it sounds kind of gay what you're talking about here.
In Jesus's time, in the Middle East, and prior to that, in the Roman Empire at times, right? In this culture, same-sex attraction relationships were acceptable. In fact, you had temples and practices dedicated to it. It was the Jewish people and then later the Christian people that said to the culture, "No, this is wrong." My point is that it is human nature to engage in this kind of pansexual activity, but it is Western civilization. It is the Judeo-Christian ethic that says, no, we are better than this. And to put it in the Christian parlance, this is not God's best design for you. But as political beings in a pluralistic society, I don't want to make this illegal or that illegal, but I do want to recognize that this LGBTQ, this transgenderism, this DEI, this diversity, equity, inclusion, climate change, even abortion, that these are part of a woke religion, and we're in competition with it.
Just to sort of take the religion out of it for a second, and again to talk about science. One of the things Jerry and I talked about over the weekend, we'll talk about it more in the coming weeks. It's part of the interview that I did with Stephen Meyer from the Discovery Institute, is the issue of consensus and how consensus actually stifles scientific. Which is the whole point. But to talk about science we have to be consistent. Again, not talk about consensus, but we have to be consistent
and allow for debate and argument.
If an adolescent's brain, if a child's brain is developing over time, and we use this as the basis for our age of consent laws, right? This idea that, you can't have kids. Anyway, we use this as the basis of our age of consent laws. We cannot then turn around and say, if a child comes to a parent or a teacher, worse, a teacher at age 8, 9, 10 years old and says, I'm a boy. I think I was born a boy, but I want to live my life as a girl. And then all of a sudden, we're not going to turn around and say, well, maybe it's just, confusion. Maybe you need to think about this.
It's
maybe
also
you're just, maybe you, exactly. We can't call it a phase, Jerry. That's bad. And then you have to live like that for the rest of your life, and you can't come back from it. And we're going to do what we can to support you in terms of what they are now calling gender affirming medical care, and which includes both medicine, pharmaceuticals, and surgery. And we are doing permanent damage. And I guess that's the thing that gets me, Jerry, in all of this, is we are doing so much to permanently damage. It is an accelerated reversion to tribalism. That's the only end result that can happen, the collapse of civilization.
And I thought about this. I thought about, again, to put religion back into it, the third grader in this school who is being allowed by parents and by the school system to operate as a gender, an opposite gender. These parents will have to stand before God someday, and God's going to ask them, I gave you this beautiful child as a gift,
right?
For you to take care of and to cherish and to protect. And what did you do with that gift? And again, you look at because the literature is still emerging, the science is still emerging. There's a growing population of transitioners,
right.
Those who have had the surgery, who've had their private parts mutilated and removed, who are now saying, "Why did you let me do this?"
Right, exactly. I
was 14.
Listen, mark my words. 20 years from now, this is you're going to see commercials on TV. The Camp Lejeune commercials that we have today.
Yeah,
the asbestos and mesothelioma.
Well, that's ironically
were you a victim of sexual transitioning.
Right. Sadly and ironically, that's what's going to stop it, if anything does. Because remember now, someone else said this, that the average, like the person who transitions, is a cash cow to the medical community, which is why in states across the country you see that they want public dollars to pay for these transitions. Look, we got off. We kind of went off on this shoot. This is still part of the DEI threat.
Right. It's equity and inclusion.
Right.
Yes, Jerry. Listen, because I'm cognizant of your time, and I got a Department of Education hearing to go to. You're on Sunday?
Yeah. Again, I'm going to be a little more, and if you listen to the show, I'm already very overt and clear, but I'm going to be even clearer, offering up more clarity. I think time is short. I think the battle, we're losing these battles, losing the war. And so there's no time to waste. So anyway,
Agreed.
Find the truth, plant your feet, stand firm, and God bless you.
God bless you all. Listen, next week's episode of the Lunch Hour with Federal Newswire, we've got Professor Paul Post from the University of Chicago to talk about the first anniversary of the war in Ukraine. Go and check that out. I've got some fill-in stints coming up. Have a great week, everybody. Have fun and stay safe.